All
All
right.
right.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle, Stack, Invest, Repeat podcast, where we focus on business, entrepreneurship, community networking, and building.
Yeah, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Maurice Davis from Davis and Copeland to kind of get right into the conversation. When I think about branding and how important it is to your business as you're trying to grow your business or establish, some people confuse the two. They think that branding and marketing are the same. So, what would you say, Maurice? Would you say are they the same? Are they in the same bucket, or people should understand that there are two different entities?
Wow. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And that's a great opening question. They're absolutely different, and they should be celebrated as being as different as possible. I often talking about branding at times, and people are always asking me, what's the difference? And for me, most of it's the experience. I did a post recently, and I was talking about the barber shop I used to go to. And, barbershop is a sense of community. We talk politics, we talk fashion, we talk everything. But there's difference between the barbers, and that's branding. So my barber, he would always wear his white jacket. He'd take his time, he'd brush off the chair, he'd say hello in a certain way. That experience was the brand.
Right.
Well, I can't agree with you more. When I think about my barber or the amount of barbers that are there, I know which brand I'm going to.
Right.
So
Right.
that's 1,000%
Right.
correct. It does represent, the being, right?
Right.
So as an entrepreneur or somebody that is just getting into business, what would you say is one of the key fundamentals or key fundamental things that they should be focused on when you think about starting their business or they're in business right now?
That's another banger. The best thing is that the fact that they're actually getting into business. They're recognizing there's another way into getting into things. And if you look at, I have a background in hospitality, and there's lots of people that work at the Marriott Hotel that don't own the stock. So there's no value in there. So getting into the business is a good thing first and foremost. The second thing is they gotta have a vision. What are they trying to build? And once that's established, it's always good to also follow up with a number. What's the vision? What are they trying to build? And of course, to make money.
For sure, for sure. So touching on, you said you have a background in hospitality. Can you talk a bit about like your background, your journey into where you are now and kind of how you came up?
Sure. So coming from a Jamaican background, West Indian background, our house was always a place where people gathered and ate food. And, my mom was always very engaging. She started off as a caregiver, and this is important to me because my mom passed on the Monday, and on the Wednesday, you guys called me to come up for the event, and I'm laying her to rest on Saturday. But my mom was the biggest in hospitality. She worked for a Jewish family, and they engaged her and embraced her on her own and called her Holly. And that's because of her hospitable ways, In the end, she no longer became a housekeeper, she became a confidant. So she had an insane ability to identify, acknowledge, engage, and connect with people. And that engagement piece is essential to hospitality. So I got a job, again, and I hate the word job, but I got a job in 2007 working for a company called Cintas. Brilliant business. Cintas does all kinds of different services, but the division I was in, they did the brand uniforms for hotels. So imagine everybody in the hotel, 3 to 5 pieces of each, right?
Right.
Didn't know that business existed before. And when I started, they said, oh, you got to go talk to the VITOs, the very important top officers, usually general managers, director of operations. But what I did was different. When I went, I just connected with everybody. And in most hotels, in housekeeping, there are people of color. So I would go in Christmas, I would bring black cake, Easter, I'd bring bun and cheese. I would engage with them, and they would tell me everything I needed to know. And then I realized I was a brand within a brand where people wanted to do business with me solely because I was able to connect and engage with them, not because they had to buy from us because we were, the biggest company on the block. So I did that, and once I learned the difference between the two, I always would go down the lane of being a brand versus the business. And you gotta remember, going back years ago, long time ago, when you were starting a business, they would say a business plan, right?
Yeah.
It was never a brand plan. And the brand is the bigger picture. There was an exercise done, and this exercise continually be done when they'll ask people to draw ketchup. What's the definition of ketchup? Right?
Ketchup?
Ketchup.
Like for your hamburger ketchup?
Yeah, ketchup. So they say draw a bottle of ketchup, and everybody in different countries, different places, different ages, they drew a bottle of Heinz. That's the brand.
Got you.
So they own that market. They own that they dominate that market share. Even when you think of ketchup, you just think of Heinz. And there's a number of products and services that you think about, and a name just comes to mind. And that's the power of branding.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, very powerful. Branding is very powerful, and I think what you just said is spot on. Even from a consumer mindset, right? When we go and we shop, we may be out and for, I don't know, let's just say you're going buying a faucet. Right away, your mind will go to Kohler, to these big brands, because you resonate them with either quality, history, or something. Remember Sears, right?
Yeah.
Before they obviously weren't able to adapt with the change in the respective retail space, but that's what they were known for, right? You always tied Sears to brands, whether it be Kenmore, whether it be a Craftsman. You knew that you were going there and you were going to get a brand that not only represented quality, but it represented longevity, and it was going to be able to execute at a very high level.
Yeah.
1,000%. So when you think about, your business, you have to, number one, you have to have an idea, right? You start with an idea. What would you say is the next thing? I know you mentioned you mentioned that number, right? That number is important. And hopefully you guys didn't miss that out there, because that number is very important. How are you going to get to that number? What does that number look like? What would you say would follow that?
That's a good question. Well, let me take a step back and define a number, and I'll share my number as well too. So the number is a set amount broken down to the currency over a specific period of time. So my number is to do $20 million US in the next 10 years. I started in 2020, so now I'm in year 4. The beautiful thing about it is it's my number. So let's say I fail miserably when I get the worst grade I got in school, which was maybe like 30% high school math, high school math at the time, which I just didn't like, but I'm still sitting on $6 million US. Right. So not many people can say that they have $6 million US. So once you have that number, then you can break it down. Is it my own business? Is it real estate? Is it investing? And then you have this bucket that you're trying to fill, but you need to define it. And I think that's what's missing. Most people don't have a starting point, so they don't do the things that they're supposed to do. So have an idea, have the vision, have the number, and then you would have a critical path, which is just a strategic plan of things that need to happen over a specific period of time.
Got you. That makes sense. Because it's like it's like GPS, right? How do you get to where you're going to if you don't know where you're going? Like, you can't just appear somewhere.
And the GPS is a fantastic example. I use it every day. And what happens when you miss a turn? It just reroutes you.
Right.
If there's a better route, it tells you there's a better route. So the GPS is a perfect example. Even living in the city, there's nowhere I go without turning on the GPS.
Absolutely. but you can't get anywhere unless you know where you're
Where
trying
you're
to go
going,
to,
where
and
you're
that's
trying to
your
go.
number.
And that being said, let's not lose sight of what's going on. When I was growing up, we're talking about millionaires.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about billionaires.
Yeah.
There's people on the planet worth $100 billion.
And up.
So that speaks to the number of opportunities that are out there. And this is why it's important to do these things.
Yeah, the generational wealth has changed dramatically. Like you said, it has now gotten to a landscape where these numbers go on forever, and it's out there. There is something that you can tap into, and we see it, firsthand with multiple people, whether it be celebrities, if you consider them celebrities, or locals, right? We watched, people that have come from our own city.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Take something and now turn it into these multi-million-dollar machines with multiple different streams of revenue coming from different avenues. I know we just mentioned GPS going, having a starting point and an ending point, right? But how important is the why?
The why is extremely important. And I always ask people if they have an ask of me, because the why defines why you're actually doing it. And it prevents me from coming and say, okay, you should do this, this, and this, and this. Right. It's not your why. So your why is your driver. So when you have that why, and I say in the consulting, when I'm consulting, I say, okay, you need to do A, B, C, D. It should tie back to your why. If it doesn't tie to your why, you don't do it.
That makes sense.
So the why is actually very, very important. And we all have a lot of ideas on the why. For me, it's changing the landscape, changing the status quo, turning things upside down, creating legacy, charity, community, all the things that that you guys stand for, that we want to change. I have a son. My son is 34 years old, and I want to make sure that when he gets to my age, he doesn't have to go through the stuff that I went through. So that why is very important. And when we get together and go back to the numbers, so if we have 5 of us in a room and our numbers are 20 million each, it's $100 million. And we have the same why, we buy blocks under numbered companies. We change stuff.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately the mission.
Yeah.
We're here to buy blocks. We're here to go ahead and rewrite that narrative. Yeah. Like you said, I think, creating history and, doing something that hasn't been done before. We go back and forth, myself, Dale, that we're not here to create an outlet that is just going to be mediocre, right?
Yeah.
We're here to create history, but rooted in the community, rooted in transparency, rooted in high levels of execution. And I would say, and disagree with me or agree with me, you need to have that mindset to be successful in whatever space you're doing, but very important in the business world. If you're not here to execute at the highest level possible, I think you're leaving things off on the table. Yeah, right? Is that what they say? Right?
Yeah.
You're leaving a little bit of change on the table.
Right.
It goes back to that number, right? You're leaving a little bit of change on those
It's
tables,
true.
right?
True.
So that number, that why, that drive, that all of these things are encompassed of what's going to build a great brand. So now kind of just pivoting from the brand, how do you use, or how would you say the best way of going about making sure that brand becomes a household name?
That's a great question. And that perfectly ties into having the correct mindset at all times, where you seek to add value, you seek to serve, look at every challenge as an opportunity. Don't look at a job don't look at things as a job, look as an opportunity. Partners versus an employee, be an investor, be engaged. So always having that mindset, it's funny because everything or most things that were supposed to happen that didn't happen It happened for a reason, you
Yeah.
know, and things always had a way of working itself out. So when I look at things, everything's an opportunity. I also have this philosophy. It's a win-win philosophy. So when I lose, I win. And when I win, I win. So how can I lose?
I love it.
Because every time I lose or I've lost, I've learned something from it, you know? So in that mindset, I can't lose. I was born in Jamaica, came to Canada in 1978. I'm here sitting with you guys. I'm winning every day.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then even tying into what you do, we're talking a bit about this off camera, but maybe you could explain a bit like why people need like, you know, consultants or advisors like we're talking about, because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs try to take on everything and then they're struggling with things that they're not good at or just don't have any awareness for.
Great question. The times have changed, you know, and a lot of things have already been created. What's actually going on right now is collaboration. There's a platform called Noah. I'm not sure if you know them. They're in New York. They sell clothing and whatnot. And they just did a collaboration with Timex. And Timex has been around for a while. Right?
Yeah.
It sold out. It sold out in 3 days. And then the resell, the re-up, the product wouldn't be delivered for another 2 months. So everything is collaboration right now. So the ability to take a product or service or an idea and collaborate with people, you can scale it much further. And when I talk to people and I say, you know, do you have a board of advisors or do you have a board of directors? No, it's just the one structure, you know? So having that board of advisors and having advisors around you and have it strategically set up as a board where there's meetings once every month or once every quarter, you know, it's extremely important. All the biggest corporations have boards.
Yeah.
Well, that's how championship teams are built.
Yeah.
That's how championships are won.
Yeah.
They're won with teams,
Yeah.
right? We spoke a little bit. Everybody has a role, and collectively, there's our ultimate end goal. And the end goal is where you try to, you know, surround yourself with like-minded individuals that each play a specific position.
Yeah.
And everybody plays that role and executes their part. And to your point, is like you said, a board, right?
Yeah.
That's how the best companies are built. They aren't built by a one-legged machine. It is a machine that has multiple people, multiple components to it, and that's how you build these championship runs and championship teams.
Yeah, I just want to shout out the company I work for, Cintas, because the way they were structured, they called employees partners. They paid us every week, and they were very numbers oriented. So they would take a number, add 10% to that number, and divide it by 52, and there's your target for each week. Very military, very rigid. And since 2007, their market cap is about $70 billion US. But the reason why I mentioned that, because everybody that came in, they understood that they were a partner, a part of the company. And everybody understand the goal and the mission. And the company, like the chart is just up and to the right, you know, because everybody understood. And if you don't understood, if people didn't understand, and often that was the case where the environment wasn't for them, or, you know, they would just fall off. So you would be on they call it a performance improvement plan, and you know, within 2 quarters you're gone. But the language was everybody understood year over prior, month over prior, the 4 quarters of the business, the fiscal year. We listened to the financial reports too as well. So that's just an example of how things, the possibilities of things. And they're just doing hospitality service. They do mat rentals, uniform rental, clothing, nothing sexy, just the behind the scenes stuff.
No, that's very interesting, and that's mindset. Because if you're working at a place but you're being referred to as a partner, you're gonna have more pride in what you're doing. You're gonna feel like you're part of something. You're gonna have a different type of work ethic, and just feeling for what you're doing, because now you're not just being looked at as the help, like you're actually inclusive of what's going on.
Yeah.
So maybe you could speak a bit then to kind of like the challenges and or opportunities in brand development, like, like for different companies and stuff like that.
How much time do we have? It's tricky for me because I see opportunities everywhere. I call it peanut butter and jam, and these are just things that actually go together, and also things that we do as individuals, as a culture, that's just inherent to us, but it adds value to a lot of brands. Going back to the barbershop, when we go to barbershops, we're looking for that transformation, and we're sitting there and you're looking at the mirror. That mirror is prime real estate advertising space,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Music launch could be, they can drop a new track because we're listening to music. Movie launch, we wear a different fragrance, we're wearing different clothing. So the barbershops have an opportunity to create more, than to do more than just cut hair.
Yeah.
It's an environment, it's a platform. There's opportunities everywhere. Some of the challenges, just in business in general, just as individuals, one of the biggest ones for me is like, once you know who's standing in your way, once you know who those blockers are, your path becomes clear.
No, that makes sense. And that's a good point. I know I've heard many a song like bust in the barbershop, first time you hear a song.
Oh man,
and
our
it's getting
barbershops.
repeated.
So when you think about branding, right? And I know we've spoken about that a little bit here in the last few minutes. What would you say is a good branding starting point, right? So you may start off, and I see a lot of times people do, they'll have a company and they'll brand pens, right? They'll give all their employees pens, right? What would you say is a good branding gateway?
I think the best gateway is to care. Actually, not to care, it's to care enough. Health, and this is where we should have started off, actually, and sometimes I forget, because we're relatively healthy. But if you're not healthy, you can't do anything. So as a brand, I think it's important to care enough about your partners, the people that you're doing business with, to set yourself apart from everyone else. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a client, a prospect. It was actually at the Drake Hotel, and I had COVID at the time. And I couldn't get rid of this cough. And she goes, "Oh, elderberry syrup. Elderberry syrup." And there's a brand sold at Healthy Planet, elderberry syrup. And I bought it, and it worked. So, and most people that I engage with now, they get their bottle of elderberry syrup. You guys will get yours too. It's such a little thing, but I find brands, people in business, they don't care enough anymore. So I think the engagement piece, to actually care, to really, really tap in and really care about, that's a great place to start.
I like that. I think that's a unique outlook. Right, I think it's an overlooked one.
Yeah,
that's not something that you would hear.
No.
Right, I think understanding how the two correlate. Right, the wealth mindset with a very strategic execution plan, partnership, and involvement. All of these things put together will ultimately build that brand, right?
Yeah, and not to a point where it's actually curated, premeditated. It just has to come from the heart, In losing my mom, or losing any loved one, grief is a very tricky thing. And there's not one brand that has reached out to me to say, "Hey, we know funeral planning. We can take the stress off. We can help you out with this. We can help you out with this." No one's doing that.
Right.
But they're still telling me to buy stocks and buy real estate and drive this car, Another thing about it too is like I love going out on my birthday. I have something I call a birthday envelope. So on the day of my birthday, I write on a piece of paper and I put in an envelope. And my next birthday, whatever I wrote on that piece of paper, that's what I'm doing that day.
Oh, that's dope.
So I shop on my birthday and I go to places and I got money in my pocket and I'm ready to spend, and they don't even take the time to know, hey, it's this guy's birthday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I go to so many restaurants and it's interesting. Patronize these restaurants. I know the waiter, I know the general manager, I know the brand, and never take the time to know, hey, when Maurice comes in on Wednesday, he likes gin and tonic. They don't take the time. They don't care enough.
Yeah.
Everything's just status quo. So when you get into a real competitive landscape and you see a difference between brands and businesses, it's the ones that care enough and take that extra time to go that extra step. Those are the ones that are going to succeed and thrive.
And we see that a lot.
Yeah.
That's what separates services, right?
Yeah.
When you, like you just mentioned, you go into somewhere and whether it be your favorite bar or restaurant, they know these things. They've got a good pulse. You build a rapport with whoever it may be, and they know, and that's what keeps you coming back.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
that personal interaction, kind of like what you mentioned. It's about that genuine aspect.
Keeps you coming back and tell other people.
Yeah.
So I like to call it where you create a user experience where that experience becomes the brand. So I can tell you of a place that I've been to, and I can tell you about the service, and you know exactly where I was.
So when we think about everybody has a history, right? Maurice has a extensive history of working with numerous brands. Do you find that your backstory is more important than what you're doing tomorrow?
It's a good question.
Which one, if you had to pick the two?
I would take tomorrow. I take the building, not what we've done previously. So it's good because when people ask me, they always ask me, what do you do? And it's a networking thing too. People usually, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah.
And I shy away from that because I can tell you anything. And I know the minute sometimes they don't even listen to what I say before they're on to the next question. So I like to know what people want to build. And then I can take my experience and apply it to what they want to build.
No, that's a gem for you guys. So there's a networking gem right there. Everybody's asking, what do you do? What do you build is a lot more impactful because we can't do anything about what's already been done.
Right.
It's always forward looking. What are we trying to build? What are we trying to do? So tuck that one in your pocket the next time you're out in one of these rooms.
Oh man, I tell you, that one is as good as what I like to kind of throw out there, and I think we just heard it a little while back. How can I add value?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
I love that one.
How can you add value?
I love that one.
It's not about recognize what the need is, but then your follow up should be, well, how can I add value?
You can't lose if you're always adding value.
Yeah.
You always have these magical people in the room that whenever you talk, they add value. You may not like them, but they just always add value. And those people, they're gold. They're good to be around. So adding value is huge.
All right. So what would you say is what do we got on the horizon for Davis and Copeland? You've knocked down so many doors. You continue to knock down so many doors. You've now sparked you sparked the brand in everybody's mind, so they can recalibrate themselves to propel them to that next level of business. So what's next for yourself?
So it's interesting because there's a gentleman, his name is Max Martin. Most people don't know who Max Martin is.
I'm not familiar.
Max Martin is a German songwriter, and he's written songs for the Backstreet Boys, New Kids on the Block. Any boy band, usually Max Martin writes the songs. So I like to be that role. I want to transition into the role where I'm an ingredient in the mix, songwriter, producer. If you take any product, you usually see certain ingredients. Salt and sugar is usually one of the products. So I want to be a producer songwriter because I said collaboration is what's happening right now. So my goal, and this is why I love what I do, is to make other people's brands even better by being the songwriter, producer, or an ingredient in the mix, being in the background. So the new format is we'll take an idea, we build a strategy around it, and then we help with the execution. And then furthermore, once you take that and you put it on the right platform, then it's easy to scale.
No,
So it's called ideas, period, because ideas are everywhere.
I like it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So and that applies, and this is why I'm so excited, because I got some stuff I'm ready to
Ready to cook. He's ready,
ready
to
to
cook.
go. That's
Right?
required to be on the right platform, right? When we recognize certain things, we put on the right platform. Just like I showed you the Zeddy. We'll come back to that at a later point, right? We'll do a whole case study on it. We see an opportunity, we take the idea. Again, we build a strategy around it, we execute it, and we put it on the right platform, and we'll be able to do that for big brands and be an ingredient in the mix, be compensated for the value that we bring to the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't stress to everybody enough. If you didn't know, now you know. You need to tap in with Maurice Davis. If you're struggling with, you've got a great company or you've got something going on and you need to try to take that to the next level, I can't stress to you enough. Get in contact with this gentleman. He will take your business. He will take your idea to the next level. And that's not coming from a personal standpoint. That's from a professional standpoint.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I worked long and hard to redefine the process. On my side, this is how we classify. We start with prospects, and then you take a prospect and you turn them into a customer. And then you take a customer and turn them into a client. And most companies, the distinction is not difference between customer and client. But the real goal is when you take from client to partner and partner to an investor. And when you have the partner investor, it's like the 80-20 rule. Again, referring back to Cintas, I learned so much from that company. With a portfolio of $1.5 million for the fiscal year with a target, I get 20% of that revenue. Sorry, I get 80% of that revenue from 20% of partners investor, right? Mm-hmm. All the rest was just gravy. So we get to a point where I'm 9 months into fiscal, I've already hit target because you use that philosophy, right? So I'm looking to do the same thing for a lot of brands in Toronto, a lot of brands in the US, a lot of people that have platforms that they see opportunities and they may not be leveraging it.
Yeah. Dope. I don't know, man. That sounds like that's what more can you say, really? Like you hit on so many points.
That just sealed the deal.
Well, that's why people got to come out to the event.
Yeah.
And that's why, I'm so happy, and I was really happy when you reached out, because the number of opportunities that are out there, and not just for us, but just for everybody, it's insane.
It's only up from here. Well, again, man, thank you so much. Again, if you don't know, now you know. Tap in, Maurice Davis, Davis and Copeland.
Yes, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Same here, man. Same here.
All right, appreciate it, man. Yeah.